one of the most anticipated projects these last few years, the Underground Railroad, the first television series from the famous filmmaker Barry Jenkins of Moonlight, is really close to its release date. The Underground Railroad is an adaptation of Colson Whitehead's 2017 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel of the same name, and it will premiere on Amazon Prime Video. For any of you wondering, Whitehead's novel is about the events that took place in the 19th century Underground Railroad, where American slaves used to go south in order to find liberation. Amazon Synopsis. The synopsis for Jenkins' adaptation reads, quote, "The limited series chronicles young Cora's, Thuso Madibu's, journey as she makes a desperate bid for freedom in the antebellum South. After escaping her Georgia plantation for the rumored Underground Railroad, Cora discovers no mere metaphor, but an actual railroad full of engineers and conductors, and a secret network of tracks and tunnels beneath the southern soil." Release date. Thuso Madibu will play one of the roles in the series together with Chase W. Dillon, Little America, Aaron Pierre, Krypton, and Joel Edgerton. The Underground Railroad is set to premiere on May 14th, 2021. The production of the show faced a lot of struggles because of the coronavirus pandemic, but fortunately, after 116 days of filming, the first season was done. The director of the series, Jenkins, told IndieWire that directing the show is one of the biggest challenges he ever faced. So, many fans have been wondering about details of the Underground Railroad, and more importantly, if the show will feature any of the myths and awful fates presented in the novel. Well, let's get into it. The Untold Truth. Mexico is a country known for speaking out when it comes to enslaved people. The country, unlike most countries, often spoke about slavery and freedom in every imaginable way. People who wanted freedom found throughout the years. In 1829, Vicente Guerrero, who was of African descent, played a huge role in destroying and ending slavery in Mexico. This was 34 years before Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Mexico then freed over 200,000 enslaved people and initiated a pathway for captured Africans that were only hoping for freedom. Texas was once a part of Mexico, and back then there was a lot of slavery in the area, which led to the Texas Revolution. The revolution ended with the Republic of Texas, and then in 1845, Texas was officially a state, and the awful situation with capturing Africans started again. Now, let's talk about the Northern Underground Railroad that features the stories about the poor people who were finally led to safety and were even hidden in other people's homes. The slaves were traveling south, and they went through literally everything in order to reach their destination, Rio Grande. According to many reports, 5,000 to 10,000 enslaved men and women found freedom through the Rio Grande pathway. But sadly, there were also people who were caught, and they were killed. The Underground Railroad is a common topic in American history. Nevertheless, people have been wondering if any of the stories told throughout the years are true. Secret codes stitched into quilts, safe houses with lanterns in the windows, and hundreds of thousands of slaves escaping to freedom along a secret route. Escaped slaves continued their lives with Mexican names and married Mexican citizens just so they could peacefully live their lives. This way, they were never a part of history. Now, despite many myths involved in the Underground Railroad, the reality of the situation is still troubling and disturbing. In 2007, a student at Columbia University revealed a list of escaped slaves in the papers of Sidney Howard Gay. Gay played a significant role in the Underground Railroad, as he was the one who kept notes about who the escaped slaves were and what their names were. Eric Foner then saw the list, and in that time, he was writing his book on Abraham Lincoln, The Fiery Trial, for which, as we previously said, he won the Pulitzer Prize. In an interview with the New York Times, Foner said, quote, "I was amazed. I had never heard of this document or seen it cited." He then went deeper into Gay's writings. His research resulted in a new book, Gateway to Freedom, The Hidden History of the Underground Railroad, released in 2015. When it comes to the myth about slaves traveling the Underground Railroad alone, the New York Times book review reads, quote, "Instead of the popular image of a lone fugitive running through the woods, Mr. Foner's analysis of Gay's notes suggests a significant number escaped in groups, often traveling on trains or boats, helped along by blacks working in the maritime industry, including some in southern ports like Norfolk, Virginia." Now, there's the myth that the Underground Railroad was essentially the act of white heroes. This is, not true, since in the South, those who found freedom were attended by mostly black people. Also, when they got to Philadelphia or New York City, black people were the ones who assisted them along the way. And we're not claiming that no white people were helping in finding freedom. There were, but mostly, black people were the ones who offered help. The Underground Railroad was something that showed humanity. With all these things happening nowadays, we should bear in mind that this was a perfect example of black and white people working together in order to get to a point where freedom is not something you should deserve. Now, actual Underground Railroads did not exist until 1863. According to John Rankin, quote, "It was so called because those who took passage on it disappeared from public view, as really as if they had gone underground. After the fugitive slaves entered a depot on that road, no trace of them could be found." Awful fates. In 1857, the Supreme Court of the United States, in the Dred Scott decision, declared that, quote, "A person of African descent, whether emancipated or free, has no right which a white man is bound to respect." The United States Constitution, written in 1787, claimed that, quote, "Fugitives from labor, meaning slaves escaping from one state to another, must be returned to their owners." Walking on the Underground Railroad was an awful scene. Runaway slaves had to travel really long distances, on foot, while worrying they might get caught. While doing this, they had no right amount of food and no rest. Meanwhile, their owners would post reward posters offering money to the person who would bring their slave back. So, what happened to those who got captured? Captured fugitive slaves were beaten, branded, jailed, sold back into slavery, and in the worst cases, killed. While walking the way of the Underground Railroad, the slaves also needed to keep an eye on the wilderness. They needed to keep an eye on dangerous animals in order to avoid being eaten. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 provided and supported the return of fugitive slaves because they were viewed as stolen property. Unfortunately, this was the case with many slaves, but those such as Harriet Tubman, Henry Bibb, Anthony Burns, Addison White, Josiah Henson, and John Parker all escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad and lived to tell their fates. Henry Box Brown was a slave that escaped in a whole different way. He got into a 3-foot-long by 2.5-foot deep by 2-foot-wide box from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The second he got out of the box, he started singing. Conductors. Underground Railroad leaders, helpers, were people with free will who wanted to help others get their rights of freedom. Conductors were people who gave slaves safe ways to and from stations. In order to successfully do this, they had a top of darkness with slave catchers hot on their heels. The dangerous situation they put themselves in did not stop them to help these poor people find their freedom. And that's probably the most selfless good deed a person can ever do. As we previously said, these people were of mixed races, and sometimes there were also people who were already freed, but came back to help other slaves. We've said this before, but slaves were not treated as people. They were literally property. So, if a conductor was caught helping slaves, he was in an awful situation. Conductors that were caught were either imprisoned, branded, and sometimes even hanged. How do you guys feel about the upcoming Underground Railroad Season 1? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed our video, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our videos in the future. As always, thanks for watching.